So, I think China is seriously preparing for war. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. It's New Year's Eve, and the only thing scarier than knowing we're one day away from being closer to 2050 than 2000 is knowing that we're just 1 year away from 2027, which is apparently still the year China hopes to be prepared to win a war on Taiwan. The one time you wish someone would procrastinate. To that end, China is finishing 2025 with a literal bang. Bang, bang, bang. Earlier this week, China launched a series of military drills called Justice Mission 2025. Yes, justice, because the only thing they love more than oppressing others is irony. But it's not called Justice Mission just for the lulz. According to Chinese state-run media, it's called that to emphasize the legitimacy and legality of China's military actions, meant to protect the safety and well-being of all Chinese people, including Taiwan compatriots. And by protect, China means shooting flaming arrows at. Are those squished worms the Taiwan compatriots they're talking about protecting? It doesn't exactly scream justice for Taiwan. I guess China was just too lazy to come up with anything more plausible. After all, China was so lazy that it churned out propaganda videos like this one using AI. Man, as an American, I'm glad my leaders don't post concerning antagonistic AI slop. Compared to previous Chinese operations, Justice Mission 2025 is by far the most extensive, testing every aspect of China's military combat readiness, including its ability to blockade and control key ports and critical areas around Taiwan. They've done this before, but this time it's not just about Taiwan. Chinese officials publicly stated that the drills are meant to test deterrence outside the island chain, and added that relevant countries, the US, must abandon the illusion of using Taiwan to contain China and refrain from challenging China's resolve and will to defend its core interests. Look, if China doesn't want to be seen as the bad guys, then maybe they should stop putting out press releases that sound like they were proofread by Cobra Commander. This is an explicit threat against the US, Japan, and other Taiwanese allies to not intervene when China attacks. It comes after Japan's prime minister said the Japanese military would get involved in self-defense if China attacked Taiwan, and in the face of Japan building up its missile archipelago near Taiwan, including missile batteries, radar towers, ammunition storage sites, and other combat facilities. On top of that, the US recently announced even more military aid to Taiwan, which included HIMARS, tactical missile systems, self-propelled howitzer systems, javelin and tow missiles, and more. I've heard of fire sales, but not firepower sales. Now, most likely the PLA has been planning this operation for months. They didn't just pull it out of a hat to scare Japan and the US, but how they've decided to frame it is meaningful. China is clearly operating on the assumption that it will need to fight against the US and others over Taiwan. To that end, China is doing more than just practicing isolating Taiwan and deterring others near it. It's preparing to take the fight to the US with anything and everything at its disposal. You know, in the name of justice. Bloody, brutal, unethical justice. We see this with China testing anti-ship hypersonic missiles like the YJ-20, increasing the number of missile launchers at its disposal, and expanding nuclear warhead manufacturing. Because the first thing I think of when I think of Lady Justice is how much she loves nukes. She only carries a sword because she can't carry nuclear Armageddon in just one hand. China's military is also practicing how to wage war all over the Pacific. These dots show where Chinese aircraft carriers have operated since 2022. But it's not just China's military and Coast Guard that we have to worry about. It's China's everything. Because China blurs the line between civilian and military assets harder than Clueless blurred the line between romantic teen comedy and should we call the police on this adult hooking up with his 16-year-old ex-stepsister. One way it does that is by hiding among civilians, like this mobile launcher disguising itself as a crane from the Chinese company Zoomlion. They're basically like Hamas with more resources, with the same amount of dumb influencers rooting for them. The CCP also directly uses civilian companies for military purposes. So we should assume that every Chinese ship is a potential military threat, which the Philippines don't have to assume because they know. For example, a recent Reuters report showed how China practiced using loaded deck cargo ships to launch amphibious assaults. There's also evidence that China used transport vessels to carry attack helicopters and packed cargo ships with modular missile launchers. It's like they're making the world's lamest non-transforming transformer. This one here appears to have containerized vertical launchers that are enough to carry 60 vertical launch cells, which is 2/3 the vertical launching capacity of an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer. It also appears to have Type 1130 30mm close-in weapon systems, Type 726 decoy launchers, and large rotating phased array radars. All packed into a civilian cargo ship. Right now, Venezuela is thinking, how come you don't go after any of those boats? Of course, there's the question of whether commercial ships can actually use these systems effectively. Just slapping weapons on ships isn't enough. Like slapping boxing gloves on a doofus doesn't automatically make them a boxer, right, Jake Paul? But it's safe to assume that if China is installing these weapons on cargo ships, they also have the software needed to operate them. And speaking of civilian military fusion, let's not forget about China's global fishing fleets, which are illegally stealing fish from all over the world, including Africa and Latin America. This plot to the next Finding Nemo movie is super dark. These fishing fleets are absolutely massive. These glowing red lights you can see from space, they're Chinese fishing vessels using red LED lights to hunt for squid. That's how massive these fleets are. And there's no telling what they can do beyond stealing the world's fish, thanks to China's shipbuilding capabilities, which is 232 times greater than that of the US. China basically has a war machine that can build 1,700 ships a year, each one potentially a war asset. These end up all over the world with the support of China's dual-use ports. So when they say they're peacekeepers, what they mean is, I'm going to keep a piece of this country, and a piece of this country, and a piece of this country. They could strike from anywhere, including America's backyard. That's not just some hypothetical I came up with for the sake of fear-mongering. The Chinese state-run media footage, as well as this, show the Chinese military simulating attacks in the Caribbean. You see? It's a hypothetical they came up with for the sake of fear-mongering. That in itself should be seen as a major red flag for US security, or in this case, a major red light warning. It literally looks like a kaiju is going to rise out of the world's most disappointing red light district. So yeah, it's bad. It makes sense why Trump prioritized security in the Western Hemisphere in his national security strategy. It's clearly about countering Chinese operations. So what can the US and its allies do about all of this? Well, they are doing some things. For example, Japan is planning to step up help for South American countries to combat illegal Chinese fishing with surveillance drones and other equipment, and tightening land laws with increased disclosure requirements. Which was about time, decades ago, but hey, better super duper late than never. After all, out of almost 3,500 properties bought near critical security facilities and remote islands in Japan in 2024 alone, almost half were from China. What a series of literally thousands of coincidences. Then there's Trump's Golden Dome, which is a missile defense initiative and not a golden version of the Las Vegas Sphere. Trump also initiated the U.S. Coast Guard Force Design 2028. And the U.S. is also working on building up the Golden Fleet, a callback to Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet, and not Trump's Golden Toilet. I hope. Hopefully something good will come out of U.S. collaboration with Japanese and South Korean shipbuilders. But it's not enough. The U.S. needs to do better at political warfare in the Pacific to avoid losing vital logistical locations. And it needs to rapidly increase missiles, as well as torpedoes like the Mk-48, which isn't just the next Mortal Kombat game. And as nice as drones are, we still need manpower to supplement U.S. naval assets. But maybe we can make the most of each man. Why not have ships that can operate with just an officer, chief, and maybe 6 guys operating Mk-141 guided missile launching systems? 16 naval reservists per ship's max. Sounds nice. Less time to wait in line to use the non-golden toilet on board. But you know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them. So there's one more thing that the US should consider. Piracy! The US needs its own civilian military fusion, its own fleet of armed merchantmen, aka US privateers, authorized by Congress via letter of marque. It's totally legal, and it could offer a low-cost tool to enhance deterrence in peacetime and gain advantage in wartime. By capturing or destroying vessels and goods for the US government, hopefully while saying, "Look at me, America's the captain now." There's a lot going on, and the US and its allies are going to have to get creative, because when it comes to China, they won't follow the rules. Whatever solution there is, one thing's for certain. The US is going to need tons, and I mean tons, of vertical launch systems for all these targets of justice. And there's something you can do as well. Sign up for my free weekly newsletter. It's a great way to stay in touch with me and the team to get the latest China news, especially with YouTube burying the show in the algorithm. Just click here or the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.